your martial arts movie podcast.
Haha! I threw that shit before I walked in the room!
Featuring drunken Thai boxer Will.
Too bad you will die.
The also drunken wrestler Mark.
I said I don't want trouble!
And drunken karate master Zero.
You've lost your balls.
And now,
I know Kung Fu. You know, baby.
Fists of Fail.
Guess what? We're talking about everything, everywhere, all at once. We recently saw this in the theaters. Hey, new martial arts movie theater release experience. That was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Not strictly a martial arts movie, though. This is also a comedy. It's also a drama. It's also heavily sci-fi, surprisingly. So it's a very mixed bag of things, sorts to say.
This is the kind of movie you don't watch when you're high as fuck. or maybe do watch it while you're high as fuck and then come out of it with your, like, just parts of your brain just melted into the seat. Because it's, man, watching this movie is a trip. Yeah, this is not exactly what I thought most general martial arts fanatics would be into, but that's not to say that, you know, a martial arts movie can't have a good story and be very engaging and be very cerebral. But it definitely doesn't fit with the typical MO of the kind of movies that we watch. Zero, what is this movie about?
Oh,
I have to make you do it, otherwise I have to do it.
This one's kind of tough
Yeah.
because it's a movie about parallel universes, parallel lives, all coexisting, you know, running concurrently.
So when does Spider-Man show up? When does Tobey Maguire appear? No, not
in
that
all
kind.
the multiple edits of the different versions of Michelle Yeoh you see, maybe there was a Spider Michelle Yeoh. You know, we don't know.
Just Andrew Garfield's just in the background, yeah.
Right. So, this movie stars Michelle Yeoh. She is the head of a household, married to Ki Hugh Kwan, her husband. They have a daughter, and Michelle Yeoh's father is coming to stay with them. And then at the same time, they are being audited by the IRS. So there's a lot of hectic things going on in their life. The daughter, they're having a party for the laundromat that they all run together as a family. And at the same time, they're trying to plan for the party. Then they got audited, so they go to the auditing office and they meet Jamie Lee Curtis, who is their auditor. I don't know if that's the correct word for it.
Auditor, but auditor sounds like it's an artsy kind of auditor.
Right. She's kind of like an antagonist in the movie. You know, gets regulated to kind of like a mini boss. And what ends up happening is Michelle Yeoh is visited by a parallel universe version of her husband. He explains to her that she is, I guess, the one?
The one. Yeah, you might as well just say it. She's the one, yeah.
Right. So there is an evil that is kind of spreading amongst the multiple universes where Michelle Yeoh has different lives. She's all the different paths that she could have went down in her life. They all do different things. Some of them have hot dog fingers. Like it's all very, very crazy visual stuff. And he tells her that there's this evil entity that's trying to, I guess, destroy the multiverse or the parallel universes. And she might be the key to stopping it. So he's like trying to recruit her. And it's about her trying to just understand all of this amidst being audited, having drama with her father, and then also having drama with her daughter, yes, and her husband. So lots and lots of different story points going on and character stuff going on.
Yeah. You mentioned the one earlier, and I mean, I think a lot of people have memed the hell out of this movie and said like, "Oh, we're a parallel universe movie with martial arts in it. We already have that. Jet Li made it in 2001." Sure. I mean, like, jokes aside, that's this movie obviously like takes a completely different route. I mean, and actually, like, I think execution, it's like not even, it's completely apples and oranges. Yeah, sure, you can think of like the similarities, you know, like, oh yeah, like you channel the powers that you had in another life, in another universe, sure, yeah, but outside of that, the similarities, like, that's it. That's where the similarities end.
Thankfully, it's not just that movie, because that movie was really kind of bizarre and weird and fun. Yeah. And I was worried that, I wasn't really worried. I was hoping that it wasn't just going to be the same thing. And thankfully it's not. It's something very, very more complicated, much, much more complicated. They have to really, really hold your hand trying to explain the parallel universes, how she's able to gain these powers, and then how she's also able to, I guess, gain the memories of like her other lives and experience things in their shoes.
Yeah. It's trippy, and it's deliberately confusing to make Michelle Yeoh's character, and basically anyone who's else also like has like these jumping abilities, to have these experiencing two parallel experiences at once. And it can be it like deliberately makes you as a viewer feel like the anxiety, the tension that the character is going through. Michelle Yeoh is going through. It's all deliberate. And on that note, the first 10-ish minutes of the movie is just like an onslaught. It's anxiety building. It's a lot of tension. They're just setting up like what kind of perils that she's facing, like before even any of the action begins. Like, she's just, you know, her life is in shambles, or it's like it's basically completely unstable, and she's just trying to find like some sort of order and structure, and trying to like figure all this shit out. So yeah, like the one key thing about this movie is that it's basically a family drama, like just masked in a sci-fi guise. And I wouldn't have expected this movie to be so emotional. Oh God. Because it really does get that way, especially towards the end.
Yeah, I was thinking of a way to describe this, and I was gonna say this movie is like an emotional sledgehammer. It's extremely heavy-handed at times. You know, take that as a positive or a negative. But it's effective in eliciting an emotional response out of you, whether you want it or not, actually. And that's where some of my nitpicks or negatives may come from. It gets a little too much sometimes. Like I like feeling emotions, because that's
quite a statement.
Well, you get to know these characters, and so you want to root for them. You understand the difficulties of their relationships, because we've all been there. You know, we've had problems with their husband or wife. You've had problems with your parents, and then I personally don't, but you know, you can see the mother-daughter thing going on. I don't have kids, but then obviously I've had parents, so I understand it at that aspect. The movie feels sometimes that it's casting too wide of a net, because it's hitting all these marks. Right. But even though the net's wide, I think they caught everything correctly, and they gathered it all correctly. So even though it's a bit much, I think they were very successful in reeling it all in and actually making it work.
Sure. I agree to some extent. I don't know how to elaborate into that anymore, or like expound on that anymore without going to spoilers, which is something we won't do for this episode. We're going to keep this very general, even for the action. Sorry, guys. Maybe one day we'll cover this in an official action review. Although, I mean, not to jump ahead already, but you know, like, I don't think we will talk too much about the action, anyways, because there is action in this movie, and that's probably what you guys are here for. You want to hear what our thoughts are about that, but we will get to that. But just to summarize that super quickly, it's not, you know, it's good. It's there, but it's, you know, like, that's not the focal point. The focal point is the story, the world building, the drama, the character relations between all, like, everyone, and basically Michelle Yeoh trying to piece all these things together. And it's funny because listening to the behind the scenes, or like their press junkets and them explaining it, they keep on saying that like Michelle Yeoh's perfect casting. She was the one that like once they had her in the role, they're so happy that she was in it because like they can't imagine anyone else in the role. Although I think their initial scripts had Jackie Chan in the role, and I'm like, I can see that. Although I'd prefer it not to be. Michelle Yeoh is perfect because she legitimately looks like she doesn't understand what's happening in the movie. And you kind of want that because it's kind of like that fish out of water. And it really does feel like even towards the end of the film, she doesn't actually know what's going on. But that works for the character because she's just an everyday housewife. Like, well, not housewife, sorry, but like, mother. Like mother who owns a laundromat and is an immigrant parent living in America. She's not... she's just an ordinary person. Right? So like that's like I felt like yes, it is technically appropriate that they got Michelle Yeoh for the role. And I don't know where I was going on with this. I just wanted to like say like that I'm glad that she's starting to get a little bit more exposure, especially after Crazy Rich Asians. And I know I'm saying that in a really weird way because
she's had a lot of exposure,
exactly.
Before that, but in America, it was limited to certain things. People know her from the James Bond movies. Mm-hmm. Well, one of them, and then Crouching Tiger, obviously.
Yeah,
but, she's had international fame, but in terms of Hollywood, mm-hmm. I guess the highest profile thing she did was Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah. And according to Ki Kwan, who plays her husband in this movie, the dude played Short Round and played Data in The Goonies. Data. And he hasn't basically he retired from acting in 2001. He hasn't acted in 20 years. The dude came back because he saw Crazy Rich Asians and was like, fuck, I quit because of lack of Asian representation on film. And then here we are, like a high-grossing film that's proving otherwise. So, basically, he was on this project because of that.
Yeah, that was a shame to kind of hear about because I grew up in the 80s. I watched Goonies and Indiana Jones, and I remember. I mean, he's you can't miss him. He's got that distinctive voice, mm-hmm. and he's the only Asian kid in those movies. But to hear, I don't know if you watched the same interview, to hear him elaborate on how after that he wasn't getting calls, he wasn't getting casting calls.
Yeah,
and it's just such a shame. Like his peers were getting acting auditions weekly, daily, and like he would get them like once a month. Mm-hmm, so it then caused him to go behind the scenes, and he became a stuntman, I believe.
Yep.
Or worked in stunts, coordinator. Mm-hmm. Yep. I don't know how accurate this is. Apparently, he did work on Jet Li's The One. So that's a funny.
Look, he just came back full circle.
Full circle, yeah. And then I believe he went to Taiwan, and I think he did some action movies there.
Okay.
And then just to hear him, FOMO about Crazy Rich Asians, and he said that after he saw that, he called an agent friend mm-hmm. and asked like, "Oh, would you represent me or something along those lines?" And he got a call for this movie 2 weeks after that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. That's like, it seems like a very triumphant and very
like
triumphant story. Yeah,
it's uplifting. It's very feel good. You left the industry because the industry didn't technically want you, and now it took 20 years for Asian representation to finally become more accepting. And the thing I like about this movie is, it appeals to me because I'm Asian, but I'm not Chinese, but I still understand what they're saying, and it doesn't have to be just an Asian thing. I think a lot of people can understand, I'm having difficulty with my parents because they don't understand me. Mm-hmm. Or, that's kind of one of the running themes. The daughter is very frustrated with the mom, but the mom is also very frustrated with the father, who's, mm-hmm. It's that cycle of, the way your parents are treating you is like, oh my God, this is turning me into my parents, even though I don't want that.
Yeah, it's almost like just basically a analysis into family dysfunction, and
Yes.
yeah, like it's so weird because this movie, it you wouldn't expect it to go as heavy-handed, coming from the guys who made Swiss Army Man, which it's a great movie. I love that film, but like it actually, that movie surprisingly gets emotional too. But boy, is that movie weird. And this movie specifically takes a like another like hard left turn. It's like it goes really emotional as well, and like it gets very very like heavy-handed at times. But I'll at the same time, like, instead of the flatulence that you would get in the Swiss Army Man, you have let's just say inappropriate toys that are used in this movie that are part of the action scenes. Yeah, and then like you're weaving in all the like the martial arts into like all this like very serious family drama. Like, it shouldn't work, but it kind of does. And then like the premise behind it all has to do with a bagel, and I don't want to go into that anymore without spoiling it. It all sounds silly, like the way that I'm describing it, but like, yeah, it surprisingly works when you look at the sum of all its parts. Like the movie just really does stand out, pretty well.
Right. This is one of those movies where like you could take screen grabs and just start putting screen grabs together and be like, how does this relate to anything? When you watch it, it really does all come together because it's just a very, very well written script. This must have been a nightmare for the editors to put together because there's just so many different versions. It's a parallel universe movie. So many different versions of the characters that they literally cut to. You'll see that in the trailer, so that's not a spoiler there. But it's just so complicated. But to go back to it, so you started talking about the action, and I think we can talk about the action to a point, but then we need to stop because some of the action is so good, but it's good in a sense because it's surprising what they do with it. And so this is action choreographed by the guys of Martial Club. I think it's Andy and Brian Le.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure they've said like they're very influenced by like Jackie's stuff.
Oh, absolutely. You watch anything on their YouTube, yeah, for sure.
And we have the typical hand-to-hand fighting stuff that goes on in this movie. Surprisingly, I wasn't expecting action like on that sense. But then what they do with the props and how
well, let's just describe it like that. Yeah, the props,
how inventive they get with the props. And it's a little hard to talk so vaguely because I don't want to ruin it for anyone because it's a pleasant surprise. And I'll say, as a sexual pervert, I could really appreciate a lot of the fun things that they did with inanimate objects and possibly orifices. So I'll put it out there like
it's no surprise if you guys are follow any of these people on social media. They do mention like the kinds of objects and props that they used in the choreography. How they use it, we'll leave it to anyone who's curious enough to watch the movie. But yeah, like it actually not only is it's usually sometimes the props dictate the action. This is where like like that where the action dictates the kinds of props they'd use. This is where like props actually dictate the kinds of action you'd use. On top of like the glitchy kind of like parallel universe shifting that's happening on screen. Like that, all that's like super creative. Like I just love like a lot of the visuals that you get in this movie, and that's like you said it before. Like it would be a nightmare to like edit and like I saw this movie and I got like vibes of like Edgar Wright. Like I just like I like it's like there's so much attention to detail. Like not to jump away from like the action. I mean, it does incorporate like the action is woven into a lot of what I'm saying too. But like some supporting characters will be introduced. They're just like background characters, but then you realize it's actually woven into the action. Like, oh, we're going to use something that we establish about that supporting character to tie into how we're going to defeat them. And that's, I know I'm staying very vague, but it'll all make sense when you're watching the film. It's like, oh, there's a lot of thought that was like put into everything. And that's something like an Edgar Wright movie would do. Like basically like nothing is just like pointless writing fodder. Or, like everything is like well planned.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's not like it's not just thrown in there to have it in there. Like it actually comes back to, for plot reasons, for character reasons.
Yeah. And it's even more surprising because this whole movie is another. I mean, we're gonna say this about like every new release for quite some time. It's a COVID film. I don't know if you saw the same interviews I did. They said that the whole thing was filmed in an abandoned building. What is it called? It was the abandoned Countrywide Savings and Loan Building, and that's why a majority of the set takes place in the IRS building. But that's I mean,
it's a perfectly great use of that building. Yes. Like they maximize the hell out of this location, and considering it's a COVID film, like wisely so. Like we never see too many large groups of people that I can recall. Well, I thought I heard that it's a COVID film, but I think not the entire thing was filmed during COVID. I think like parts of it were.
Right. Yeah, I know they've been working on. They had at least had the script for it since like 2017. So yeah, it's just like it's amazing what they could do with the restrictions that they had. Like this shows. And maybe it helps that they filmed it all in one location. Like they can allocate their budget towards more important things like the effects, which really show. Man, there are so many great moments where things just stay on screen for like a fraction of a second. Like you probably, if there's 24 frames a second on screen, like you're seeing 24 images going on at once, and they're completely distinct, like to different artists, different VFX artists, like a wardrobe, like they had to make Michelle Yeoh look different in every single shot. And they don't stay on screen for a little bit. And that's my minor epilepsy warning to anyone who's watching this. But it's so impressive. It's like, damn, there's so much thought behind this.
Well, it's one of those things that, when you then own the movie, you're going to go frame by frame. You're going to look at, okay, what did they hide in there? That's what I'm looking forward to. Like, I want to see all the frames, because when they start flashing, epilepsy warning, when they start flashing through all the different versions of Michelle Yeoh, there's some hidden context there.
Yeah. No, and you actually mentioned just now, if you're going to go frame by frame, this is a movie you have to watch multiple times. I think. I don't think that you get the full experience if you just watch it the one time. Just like because coming out of it, I'm like, I vaguely remember certain scenes where like I think this would make more sense after having the context of like watching the whole film, like like sitting through the whole thing. It is slightly long, but that's not really a complaint. It's more like I felt the runtime mostly because like. Well, I don't know how to really explain it. It is a little bit over 2 hours. Would I have cut anything? I don't know. But I do feel like the ending kind of appropriately just ends in the most jarring way, if that makes any sense. It's jarring, but it's appropriate, if that makes any sense.
Right. So I think I'll disagree with you there. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is one of those films I could watch a lot, because it's I mean, for me it was really emotionally draining, like getting
yes,
the movie doesn't just have characters there to be secondary, because you could say like, oh, the husband's just there and he's the husband, but then we get a lot of connections between Michelle Yeoh and him. Like they go into it, even Jamie Lee Curtis's character, who you would think like when you're first watching the movie, you might think, oh, okay, she's there as the antagonist at first, and then we kind of sideline her for a while. But then you realize they start to really weave her back in, and you realize, oh, she's actually another character because of her parallel universe version of her as well. Yes. So almost all the characters have full arcs, or they really, really go deep into it. So by the time we get to it with them in the end, like we're really really going through everything with all of them, and
Right.
for me emotionally, because like of all these beats they're hitting and everything they're just pounding me over the head with, I don't know if I want to do that again.
Sure.
Like so soon. Like
Right.
I like this movie a lot, but I would want to take a step back before like I go into it again.
Yeah. Maybe just rewatch it from like a technical aspect. Because there's so much you can technically miss. Because there's just so much content on screen visually. This movie is a very visually like stimulating movie. I don't know. I might want to revisit it sooner than later. Maybe even go back to the theater and check it out and expose myself to more COVID potential. But yeah, I've already talked the hell out of like how much I like the movie experience as a whole. I don't know. I guess you kind of segued us into it, and I kind of got us out of it. Let's get back to the action. I think it's good. I love Andy Lee and Brian Lee's stuff. Like like Martial Club. They're super talented trickers, martial artists. And like we get some really talented stunt choreography and fight choreography in the movie. But yeah, like anytime they're on screen, and trust me, there is a lot of time to shine for these two guys. That's clearly the highlight of the action. Just like seeing them like fighting on screen. I'd say that we get enough exposure of the two. Like we get enough screen time of them too, and not to say like they have to take up all the action, but like they're clearly the most, they're choreographers and they're super talented. So like anytime they're on screen, it's like, oh, like this is where I'm really like paying attention to the action. Again, with the little asterisk that the action's not the centerpiece of this movie. And I'll say I guess I didn't realize that Ki Kwan was a stunt person. I don't remember him. I mean, like I only have my frame of reference is The Goonies and The Temple of Doom, so I don't remember anything else he was really in. So like I didn't know that he could do any sort of like fight choreography, and he pulled it off pretty well. Like I thought he was good in this movie. I
mean, he said he had to train for it. I mean, he's he's much older now,
Mm-hmm.
and I love his fight scene. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler if we elaborate on it a little bit.
Sure.
It's an awesome visual, and it definitely he has a fanny pack.
Fanny pack,
He's fighting with
I didn't know if you were going to mention it or
it's
not.
like
Yeah.
right. It's the perfect dad thing to fight with, right?
Yeah, it's
and he's
great.
beating up all these security guards, and so apparently he had to learn like the rope and dart. That's kind of how they're designing the choreography around this.
Yeah.
And if you've seen rope and dart stuff in movies, you can imagine what he would be doing with it. You know, whipping, using it to tie and throw people. Very, very exciting stuff. I could spot where he had to get digitally face doubled because you can see some of the more complicated stuff. Mm-hmm. But for some other moments, you see it's him. I mean, unless they had to digitally swap like the close-up shots, but I doubt they would do that.
Yeah, I don't know. No. Like, I mean, yeah. Like he's still can do a lot of his own choreography, which is great. I think I'm just biased because like I know Andy Lee and Brian's choreography now, so like I can study them plenty. So I'm like, all right, that's clearly them. That's clearly Andy Lee doing the drop maneuvers. But that's just me. And then on that note, we have Michelle Yeoh, who's still kicking ass on screen. She's obviously older. It's more of a dramatic performance for her, so that's where she should shine. But when it comes to the action, I was surprised in certain aspects. Like they don't give her too much to do. Like she's not like throwing freaking aerials and doing scorpion kicks like she was in the 80s anymore. But
right. And you shouldn't be really expecting that from her at this point.
Yeah.
I noticed that she gets a lot of slow motion stuff, which is fine. But you could still see it. It works for the visual of her because when she starts to learn these martial arts moves from her other parallel selves, it helps us to understand like, oh, okay, it's like we're right there with her. We're picking up the moves as she is.
Yes. There is a moment where there's one particular fight scene in the movie where she is doing a little bit more. She does get doubled at times, but other times you can clearly tell it's actually her doing it. They don't give her things that are too complicated. So, but like it's fine. Like you work with the restraints of the the actor, barring age, whatever, like any other circumstance. But they make her look really good. And one thing that I was surprised is that she can still strike her poses really well. That hasn't been lost on her at all. Like, she's still really good in terms of like, she looks like she's like, she can. I remember one moment where like she basically goes in, like she chambers her leg and goes into like a crane position. Like, wow, that's a lot of dexterity for someone that age.
Did you notice she strikes the Police Story 3 pose?
Yeah, that's what it was. I was like, oh wow, that's great. Like I'm glad that she still has that that mobility. That's awesome to see. Like I talked the hell out of like how much like I loved her, like in other movies, at least her older films. Like she's just a master at posing. It's just her dance background, so it's just great to see this in this movie. It's an A24 movie. Like for the most part, they're pretty consistently entertaining and pretty good. So yeah, I guess I'm already in the recommendation section. It's good. I'd recommend the movie. I think it's trippy. Anyone who just wants a mind-numbing popcorn like action movie, don't watch it. This movie's not for you. This movie has a little bit more heart and a little bit more thought in it. So I think that if you're into something a little bit more cerebral and emotional, I guess, like, but at the same time, there's a bagel involved, like that's like being cut between like all the talk about like divorce and your daughter disowning you and wanting to kill herself, and like somewhere along those lines they're talking about a bagel. Like if you can get past the weirdness on top of like the emotional drama, I think you'd enjoy this film. I don't know, Zero, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, everything you said. I think we were in agreement. Like, we both came out of this. We were really, really happy with it. I have minor nitpicks. It felt, you kind of mentioned this, it did feel a little long. Towards the end, they are wrapping all the character arcs up. We're now getting the really, really emotional stuff going, and they're just really, really pounding you with it. And I liked it, but it was a little too much for me. So if you're an emotional person or you get really, really moved by movies, maybe just go in with that warning. But after I left the movie, I immediately thought I want to show this to my mom and sisters. Like, I think they would dig it. So like that's kind of my recommendation. I feel like they're not into martial arts movies, but like I think they can still enjoy the family drama and also the comedy behind it too, and the weirdness. Like, I think this I mentioned earlier, this casts a wide net, and I think it really can appeal to like many different people. The
movie's undoubtedly weird. I mean, I don't want to use the word weird as in like, oh, that's such a blanket term, and so like it's a cop out, but it is weird enough that I'm afraid mainstream audiences wouldn't like it, and that's a shame. Like, maybe really? I'm just I don't feel like mainstream audiences would appreciate this movie as much.
Well, that's why I said, like, as soon as I got out of the movie, I thought, I want to show this to my sisters, because that's their mainstream audiences. Like, I don't think they're too into these kind of trippy sci-fi-ish parallel universe-ish stuff. But then I thought the way they handled it, they held your hand, they made you understand. There's probably, if you're gonna look into it, you can probably pick up our plot holes. Well, if they did this in this parallel universe, how come they're doing this, and so on and so forth. But that'll just ruin the fun. And if you're that kind of person, maybe you're not that fun to be around anyway.
That's good.
But I think I would like to think that if you just showed this to a normal person, they could, they could relate to it in some sort of way.
Sure. I want to believe that. It is long. I don't think that's an issue. Although it says part 1, everything, like within the first like 5 minutes of the movie, and then I remember sitting there and then like, you know, a lot of the movie, you know, happened and then finally it was like part 2. And I was like, oh shit, I think we're like 2 hours in. Like, what?
Yeah, I remember that too. I was like, oh, I completely forgot about that first part one thing.
But then I thought in my brain, my stupid brain was like, oh no, does that mean we're only halfway? Or like, oh no, we're only on third because this title is so long.
Oh god, the title of this movie does not roll off the tongue at all. Everything, everywhere, all. I said it right. Everything, everywhere, all.
Yeah, you did it.
Not the best. Not the best title, but still recommended.
Yes, definitely recommend.